All right, ready to dive into some Kenyan news? A wild mix today.
It is, isn't it? Politics, the economy, even a big legal story from Belgium.
Okay, so first up, Kenyan politics. Big changes happening. Former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, he's out.
Yeah, big news. Remember all his talk about those traps around State House?
Right, to keep Raila Odinga away from President Ruto.
Yeah, and now Raila's making jokes about those traps, given Kachago's sudden exit. It's pretty ironic.
So what's Odinga up to now? I heard he's aiming for the African Union chairmanship.
He is, and he's not holding back, criticizing Kachago's moves along the way. It's a bold strategy.
Is this a new chapter for Kenyan politics, you think?
Could be. I mean, it's a brilliant move by Raila.
Yeah.
Think about it. If he gets the AU chairmanship, he's got influence on a whole other level. That could be pretty useful down the line, even back in Kenya.
Makes you wonder what his long game is, right?
Exactly. Even if he doesn't get it, he's raised his profile. Coming back to Kenya, he'll have even more clout.
Speaking of big political comebacks, what about former Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko? He's fighting back after being impeached.
He is, and he's getting some support. The East African Court of Justice actually criticized Kenya's Supreme Court. Said they messed up procedurally in his case.
Wow. So what does that mean for Sonko?
It's hard to say for sure, but it could change things. This East African Court, the EACJ, handles disputes between countries in the East African community.
Yeah.
It's pretty new, but this ruling, it could be a big deal.
So it could affect more than just Sonko.
Potentially, yeah. This could give the EACJ more power, even over national courts. It might even encourage more challenges to court decisions, not just in Kenya, but across East Africa.
That's a lot of potential impact. Okay, and on top of all that, there's talk of a new political alliance forming. Jima Pia, or New Jima, bringing together communities from Mount Kenya and Eastern Kenya.
It's interesting, isn't it? JIMA, that stands for Gikuyu, Embu, and Meru Association. Historically, it's been powerful in Kenyan politics.
Right, so what's different about this new Jima?
Well, it's trying to go beyond those traditional JIMA boundaries,
Right.
bringing in more communities, potentially creating a much larger voting bloc.
Could that really shake things up?
Possibly, if they can unify those communities and get people to vote, it could change the balance of power. The big question is, can they find a leader, someone who can bridge the divides between these communities and get them to work together?
Okay, so lots happening in Kenyan politics, but the country's also facing some economic challenges.
Yeah, there are some big concerns. The Treasury wants to raise taxes by 35% on some imported goods. The construction industry is especially worried about that.
It's a tough spot, right, trying to protect local industries, but imports are getting more expensive.
Exactly. It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
Many countries are struggling with this, finding a way to support local businesses without making everything too expensive.
And then there's the whole issue with Indian billionaire Gautam Adani. Remember all that controversy around his business deals in Kenya?
Oh yeah, and it's not over yet. President Ruto canceled those contracts, but now there's talk that Kenya might have to pay penalties for doing that.
Really? So what happened?
Well, a columnist is raising this point. They're saying that maybe Kenya didn't think things through before canceling the contracts. Like, what are the legal consequences? What about the financial impact?
It sounds like a mess.
It does, and it raises this bigger question. Is Kenya getting fair deals in these international agreements? Are they on the losing end?
That's a worrying thought. What about Ruto's affordable housing program? Any updates on that?
Actually, there's some trouble brewing there, too. The professionals working on the program, they're claiming they haven't been paid. Over $1 billion in unpaid fees.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It is, and they're saying it's putting the whole project at risk. If they're not getting paid, they can't do the work.
So it sounds like the government is facing criticism on a lot of fronts right now.
They are. Broken promises, financial mismanagement. It's not a good look. It could definitely damage public trust.
And on top of that, there are some health and social issues making headlines. The government's warning about the rising risk of mpox, or monkeypox as it used to be called.
It's a concern, particularly for young children, those under 5. 2 of the 5 new cases, they're kids under 5.
So they're especially vulnerable. Is the government doing enough to protect them?
They're urging people to be careful, especially families with confirmed cases. But we need to do more. We need to raise awareness, make sure people know the symptoms and how it spreads. And testing and treatment need to be accessible, especially in communities most at risk.
And to add to the healthcare challenges, doctors in Kenya are threatening to go on strike nationwide.
Yeah, it's a critical situation. They're saying they haven't gotten what they were promised in their collective bargaining agreement. Plus, intern doctors aren't getting paid.
So if they do strike, what happens?
It could cripple healthcare across the country. Think about it. Emergency rooms overflowing, surgeries delayed, Even routine care disrupted. It would affect everyone, especially those who rely on public health care.
Okay, let's take a break from Kenya for a minute and talk about something a bit different. Over in Belgium, there's been a major development for sex workers. They've won some groundbreaking labor rights.
It's a huge story. They're the first in the world to get official employment contracts, health insurance, pensions, even maternity leave.
Wow, that's a big shift. Do you think other countries will follow suit?
It's hard to say, but it's definitely a game changer.
Mm.
Belgium's basically saying sex work is like any other profession. It's bound to spark debate all over the world.
Okay, before we wrap up this part, there are a few more stories to mention.
We've got a Kenyan marathon runner winning big, a power highway between Kenya and Ethiopia, and even a story about a woman thrown overboard during a dangerous journey.
Let's start with that marathon win. A Kenyan runner won on his first try. That's incredible.
He did. Sebastian saw he took first place in the Valencia Marathon. Not only that, but he got a pretty big prize, too. It really shows how strong Kenya is in long-distance running.
That's awesome. And what about this power highway project with Ethiopia?
It's a pretty ambitious plan. They want to build a transmission line so Kenya and Ethiopia can share electricity. Could help a lot with those blackouts.
Yeah, reliable energy would be a game changer for Kenya.
Exactly, and it's a good example of those two countries working together. Could boost their economies, too.
Okay, last but not least, this story about the woman thrown overboard. It sounds awful.
It is. It happened during a journey from Mombasa. This woman was part of a group trying to reach Mayotte, a French island. It's over 1,100 kilometers. We don't know all the details, but it's a reminder of how desperate things are for some people, the risks they're willing to take for a better life.
It's heartbreaking, especially after hearing those stories of success and progress. Makes you think about all the struggles that don't make the headlines.
Right, all these stories, they show just how complex Kenya is right now. The politics, the economy, the social issues, even how global events play a part. It's a lot to process. It really is. It's like each story gives us a glimpse into what's going on in Kenya right now.
Yeah, like puzzle pieces fitting together. Speaking of those puzzle pieces, let's go back to the political shakeups. Gachagua's exit, Raila Odinga aiming for the AU chairmanship, that's big stuff.
No doubt. Kenyan politics is changing fast. And Raila's move, going for the AU chairmanship, it's incredibly strategic.
It really feels that way. Do you think he's shifting gears, moving away from Kenyan politics, or is it just a tactic? What could it mean for Kenya?
Hard to say what he's thinking long term,
Mm.
but whichever way it goes, it's good for Raila. Wins the AU chairmanship, he's got this huge platform, continental influence. Doesn't win, he comes back to Kenya even stronger.
It's smart. And he hasn't been shy about criticizing Gachagua, pointing out his mistakes. Classic political move. But it's interesting, Gachagua is now saying he's not against Ruto and Odinga reconciling.
Yeah, it's a change of tune, isn't it? Remember how he was totally opposed to any handshake? Now he's saying he knew it was going to happen all along.
Bit of rewriting history, maybe. Trying to make his exit look better.
Could be. Politicians, they're good at adapting. When the political winds change, they change their story.
Okay, let's talk about this new JIMA alliance. Could it really become a major force in Kenyan politics? Is it just hype, or is there something there?
It's early days, but it has potential. If they can actually unite those communities from Mount Kenya and Eastern Kenya, that's a lot of voters.
Yeah, but alliances can be fragile, especially in Kenyan politics. We've seen so many come and go.
Absolutely. A few things need to happen for New Jima to work. Can they overcome the historical rivalries? Can they get people excited about their vision? And the biggest one, can they find the right leader? Someone who could bring all these different groups together.
It's a challenge, but the rewards could be huge. If they can pull it off, New Jima could dominate Kenyan politics for years to come.
No doubt about that. The political landscape is fascinating, but let's move on to the economy for a bit. Those proposed tax increases on imports, a lot of people are unhappy about that.
Yeah, especially in the construction industry. They're saying it'll make everything more expensive, harder to build affordable housing.
It's a valid concern. Those imports are a big part of construction. If taxes go up that much, it'll affect a lot of businesses and people's lives.
The government's in a tough spot, trying to protect local industries but also keep prices down.
It's a difficult balance. Raise taxes too much, and it hurts the economy. The key is finding a way to support local production without making basic things too expensive for people.
Speaking of tough economic situations, there's that whole controversy with Gautam Adani's canceled contracts, still causing problems.
It is, and it shows how complicated these international deals can be, especially for developing countries. That columnist raising the point about penalties, that's serious.
It makes you think, did the government rush into this? Did they really understand what could happen?
Exactly. Was there enough careful planning? It also raises this issue of transparency. Do Kenyans know what's in these deals? How could they affect the country's finances? They have a right to know.
Transparency is so important. And then there's the affordable housing program, people working on it saying they haven't been paid. That's worrying.
It is a huge problem. If it's true, it means there are bigger management issues within the program. Not paying people. That could derail the whole thing.
And it makes the government look bad, doesn't it? Like they can't keep their promises.
Absolutely. Affordable housing, that's a big deal in Kenya. If the program fails, it's going to affect a lot of people. It could really damage the government's credibility. And, these economic issues, they're tied to politics. How the government handles this will affect their popularity, even their chances of getting reelected.
It's all connected. Okay, let's talk about the health and social issues we touched on earlier. Mpox spreading among children, that's got to be a top priority.
Definitely. Young children are especially vulnerable. These new cases, it's a wake-up call.
The government's telling people to be careful, but is that enough? What else needs to happen?
It's a start, but we need a bigger effort. We need campaigns to educate people, make sure they know the symptoms, how it spreads. Testing needs to be easy to get, treatment too, especially for those communities where the risk is higher.
And then there's the doctor strike. Could happen any day now. A real crisis in the making.
It is. Their demands, better pay, better working conditions, they're not unreasonable. The government needs to listen to them, find a solution.
What happens if they actually go on strike? What's the worst case scenario?
It would be devastating. Imagine hospitals overwhelmed, surgeries canceled, people not able to get the care they need. It would affect everyone, but especially those who depend on public health care. The entire healthcare system could collapse.
Okay, let's shift gears again back to that story from Belgium, the one about sex workers' rights. It's a big deal.
It is a huge step forward. Belgium saying sex workers deserve the same rights as everyone else. Official contracts, health insurance, pensions, even maternity leave.
It's really making people think differently about sex work. Do you think other countries will follow their lead?
It's hard to predict, but it could be a turning point. It challenges so many traditional ideas about sex work. We might see similar movements in other countries.
It shows how one country taking a stand can have a global impact. Okay, before we move on to our final thoughts, let's touch on those other stories we talked about.
Sebastian Saw winning that marathon. It's inspiring, isn't it? Shows how strong Kenya is in long-distance running.
It does, and that Power Highway project, Kenya and Ethiopia working together on that, that's promising.
It is a really ambitious project. Sharing electricity between the two countries, that could make a huge difference, especially with all the blackouts Kenya's been having.
Definitely a sign of progress. And then there's that story about the woman thrown overboard, such a tragic reminder of the risks some people face.
It is. It shows just how desperate some people are, the lengths they'll go to for a better life. A sad reality that we can't ignore.
It's a good reminder that there are always stories happening beneath the surface, stories of hardship, of resilience. All these stories, as different as they are, they give us this multifaceted picture of Kenya.
It's amazing how all these stories, they might seem separate, but they all connect back to Kenya's present, even its future.
Yeah, it's that connection that really stood out to me in this deep dive. Like, each story is a piece of thread, all weaving together this big picture of what's happening in Kenya and how it fits into the world.
Exactly. It's like a tapestry, right? Local politics, global economics, social issues, even what's happening legally in other countries, it's all intertwined.
And it goes both ways, doesn't it? What happens in Kenya affects other places, and other places affect Kenya. It's like this constant back and forth, ideas, trends, challenges. It makes you realize we're all part of this global system. Things happening far away, they can still have an impact on us.
Absolutely. Think about that Mpox situation, the risk to children. It shows how these global health threats, they need global solutions. We can't just ignore them. We have to work together to find ways to protect everyone.
And that story from Belgium, the sex workers getting those labor rights, that's having a global impact already. It's making people question their own beliefs about sex work, how different societies deal with it.
It's incredible, isn't it? One country makes a decision, and it sparks these conversations all over the world. Shows how powerful ideas can be, how they can cross borders.
So for everyone listening, why should they care about these stories? Some of them might seem far away, not relevant to their lives.
But that's the thing, the world's so interconnected now. What happens in one place can ripple out and affect everyone. We can't afford to be disconnected. We need to know what's going on, understand how it all fits together.
It's easy to get overwhelmed, right? There's so much information coming at us all the time. That's why these deep dives are important. They help us make sense of it all, connect the dots.
Exactly. It's not just about knowing stuff, it's about understanding what it means. How does it connect to our own lives, the choices we make?
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Kenyan news and how it connects to the wider world, what's the one thing you hope people will take away from this?
I think the biggest thing is the world's a complicated place, and it's always changing. It's more important than ever to stay informed, to be curious, to ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge what you think you know, look for different perspectives, and remember, even something small can have a big impact.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring,